All right, so in this video, I'm going to go over our copy editing checklist and then give an overview of the Daily Illini Style Guide uh, and how that applies to you when you're editing stories. So here's our copy editing checklist, and you can see that you start on the content doc and you open the story, which will take you to WordPress. A lot of the time it signs you out, so make sure to remember your password. Don't make it something too hard because you might have to put that in more than you'd like to, even if you do the remember me. Yeah, these stories will be assigned by me on the day or time that you are signed up to a story. And so first, when you're going through the story, you look at all of the names of sources, people they're talking about, names of buildings, names of events, those kind of things, and you fact check them. And I will have a more detailed video on how to fact check, but basically, you're making sure that people's names are spelled correctly. You're making sure that their title is correct if it's talking about someone's job position or their year in school, their college at the university. Those kind of things have to be correct. And that's what you're looking for when you fact check, as well as dates. If it's talking about an event, you should look up and make sure that we got the date right for that. Uh, as well as like in a sports story, if they were talking about the date of uh, a game, match, whatever, as well as times, especially um, with sports stories talking about when a certain game is going to be and scores, of course. You will want to make sure that they are correct. And I will talk more in a later video about how you can find that information. So, other than that, you'll also look at the email, and that's going to be at the end of the story. There should be like one line of space at the end of the story, and then the email of the writer italicized with at dailyillini.com at the end, and not Illini Media and not uh, illinois.edu. But there is an exception for certain types of stories, which I have a slide on that later. You'll also check the photo and the caption. Typically, a caption will be two sentences. First sentence describing the photo, who's in it, the date that it was taken, and then the second sentence tries to explain it in a way that connects the photo to the story. And then after you're done going through that, you'll read through the story again and you'll check for inconsistencies and awkwardly worded phrases. Inconsistencies could be uh, somebody saying something general and then you see a quote that kind of contradicts uh, what the writer said. It could be something like that, or it could just be like factual inaccuracies that are inconsistent. And awkwardly worded phrases should be changed. And if it just seems too difficult, or if it's an entire sentence that seems awkward, that's something that you would contact me about and just say, I don't want to change this myself, but if you could look at it, um, then I can go in and make a decision. You'll also look at the headline at the top of the page, and we have certain rules that we have to follow with headlines. Sometimes it can make it pretty difficult to come up with a good headline. And there are only a few rare cases where you can like completely not follow the rules, but that is something that more is the slaughter's responsibility. But also, if you ever have a good idea for a headline, but you're not sure if someone else would like it, that's something you would also just message me about and be like, I kind of like this other idea that I have, uh, but I don't know if somebody else would like it. And then I can make the decision. And so then it would be my fault if somebody else didn't like it, which can be nice sometimes to have that pressure off. And once you're actually done doing all of these things, you will update the status of the story and you will change it from probably second edited to copy edited, which is right below it. And then you save it and don't click the publish button because it's really hard to unpublish a story. And then you will close the story tab and change the status on the content doc to the light blue color. And then you would go to the copy tag channel and tag the next person, or you would tag me in the copy editing channel, something like that. And it's important to close the story tab when you're done with the story. Otherwise, somebody else could take over, is what they call it. Uh, and then that could possibly cause uh, your changes to not be saved. And now I'm going to move on to talking about Daily Line Style Guide. And I have it pulled up here. It looks like right now, I can't find how many pages we have. It looks like 7 pages, but we have the whole alphabet of different things related to the university and having a consistent way to refer to things. And that's why we have the style guide. So then things don't change between person to person of who might be editing it because you should be relying on this rather than what you maybe think would sound better. And this is something that I maintain, I update, and I add to. Uh, so if I see a certain word or phrase coming up a lot, that's something I would either make a decision about and then add it, or I would talk to other editors to get some input before adding it to the style guide. It just has basically any word that could be related to the university and the different rules about it. So, like, even something general as soccer, there's a whole paragraph on how to say soccer, and that's an example of something you might not realize with our style guide. Is like we only have a women's soccer team, and when that happens, you don't have to say men or women's before saying soccer team. That's something you could just say soccer about. Um, but also, there are ones where it's like Office of the Vice Chancellor for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Um, so for that one, you would spell it out on first reference, and then the next time you mentioned that office, that certain one, um, in the story, then you could um, abbreviate it to the shorter version, and we just have the certain way to remember which ones uh, would be spelled out versus abbreviated, and that all you can find on the sheet. Um, so on here, you can see that we have certain rules that you might not initially think of. So, like when you're talking about Champaign-Urbana, if you wanted to shorten that, especially in a headline, Champaign-Urbana would be gigantic in a headline, and you want to make it shorter. So that's something you could do C-U for. Another big thing that will happen in almost every story that you don't say University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. You don't say UIUC. In most cases, you would say university. If it's a little more unclear, like if it's not that obvious that we're talking about our university, then you could do University of Illinois. And sometimes Illinois just works better, especially if you're like talking about a sports team. Then you could use Illinois there. Another big thing for sports is that Big Ten, 10 is always spelled out. And so this is contrary to common AP style because in AP style, 0 through 9 are spelled out, and then 10 is the numeric 1, 0. But when you're talking about Big Ten as the conference, then it's capital TEN because that's the formal title. And for a course name, if a story was talking about a course or talking about a professor who teaches a certain course, then that's where you would need this rule. And so you would have the shortened version, but then you would also do a colon with the full name of the course. Or you could do this if you were just talking about like 400 level courses in a more general sense. And every time we have a police blotter, and so that just means like a recap of all the crime that has happened in the area. The headline is always going to be this like format with whatever date it is. And when talking about a certain major, you wouldn't capitalize something like journalism, accountancy, that should be accounting. Unless if it was something like English or French, Spanish, something like that. It's a proper noun, so it would be capitalized. And for the buzz calendar, the headline's always going to be this format with whatever date it is. And so next, talking about professors and how you would introduce them if they were a source or something like that. It would be professor in whichever college they're in. And you can see how we do that on this one. There's a good amount that you get to abbreviate when you're talking about the college, but something like business, the rule is that it's always the last word of the college's name. So it's the Geese School of Business. So we refer to them as business. And then engineering, it's the Granger College of Engineering, but we say engineering unless if it was like more general. So if you were talking about, like if you were introducing a source in the story, you would say so-and-so, comma, a sophomore in engineering, comma, and these would be capitalized as they are in here. Yeah, and then this is the format to introduce like a professor. And also professor is not going to be capitalized unless it's the first word of the sentence. And for graduate or doctoral students, you would never call them a PhD student, but you could say that they're earning their PhD if that was relevant to the story. And then In a sports story, head coach wouldn't be capitalized because it's it's just a general title and it's not really an official title. Um, and there's also a good amount of university related abbreviations that whenever you mention them, you can just have the shortened version. And you can see all of those here. And another important thing to mention would be if you're doing like if you're spelling out the full thing on first reference, you would never put parentheses and then the abbreviation. So like if you did ISR, never mind, I can't remember what that stands for. Um, if you did RSO, you would not say registered student organization parenthesis RSO. Instead, you would just do registered student organization on first reference, and then second reference would be RSO. However, that's also not applicable to this one because that one can just be uh, abbreviated on first reference. But if it had to be spelled out on first reference, that's how you would have done that. Yeah, and it's also important to know that if you don't think somebody would know what it is when it's abbreviated, then you shouldn't be abbreviating it. Like, even if it was on second reference, if you don't think they'd know what that means, then it's not worth putting it in. Something I mentioned in the video before this is about emails, which are at the end of the story. We always do that in italics, and it would be daily at dailylini.com, and we would not do this. This is an internal thing that we use, but when we're publishing a story, it's going to be at dailylini.com. Except the exceptions are for buzz stories, it's at readbuzz. And also for a sports story, the author's Twitter handle is above their email address, unless they don't have an email, which sometimes happens. Not that often, they usually have an email. So this is for the buzz calendar mostly, which we might have every week this semester. And buzz is unique because they're always lowercase, unless it's first word in the headline, but that's not really common. When talking about time, am dot p or a dot m dot or p dot m dot, and you would always say noon and midnight rather than 12. And that's going to be lowercase, unless it's like the first word of a sentence. And this is for the buzz calendar, but it'll have an address, and if it's in like Champaign or Urbana, you don't need a state, don't need a zip code, unless it's outside of Illinois, which probably doesn't happen. And yeah, check address. That's definitely something to fact check. And if the event were to have a cost to it, then this is how you would do a range of a cost, or it would just be like this if it was only $4. Almost done here, but for columns, that's something that happens in opinions, and it can happen in sports. In columns, have the name of the writer and their college, like this. Haley is a senior in LES, period. Always has that. and then their email. And as I mentioned before, this is just like the way that we do the way that we would spell a certain college when talking about a student or a professor in these colleges, or if you're just talking about the college in general. And so in the next video, we will go over AP Style.